Alright, so let's get started. First of all, make sure that your jack is actually ready to pump up. Screw that handle all the way to the right. So right here I'm jacking up underneath the pinch weld. There's a little arrow right there and that shows where the jack point is. You do not want to just jack up anywhere because it will bend the pinch weld. Alright, here I'm using a breaker bar with a 19mm socket to break these bolts free. This is a 2016 Cherokee, so it has lug bolts, not lug nuts. Kind of interesting. Kind of went with like a European design on that. I'm jacking it up as high as I need to before the wheel gets to about 1 to 2 inches off the ground. And now I'm gonna grab my jack stand. Yep, jack stand. Put it underneath the A-frame, which is going to be like a solid piece of steel. You want it to be a solid piece of steel, like the beefiest thing you can find. Don't just put it anywhere under there. Alright, and I'm using my impact to take the bolts off the rest of the way. Notice how I'm not just taking off the bolts with the impact, but rather I broke them free first, and then I just zipped them off really quick. Alright, so there's your rotor, that big circle thing, and the caliper, which I'm touching right now. And that I'm using a pry bar right now, and I'm pushing or pulling the caliper towards me. I'm putting the thing in so that way the pry bar is up against the rotor and then just pulling towards me, and what that's doing is it is compressing the piston so that way when I go to take this bolt off it will flip up. So if you notice, I just holding the wrench with one hand, and then the other hand I smacked it free, and I'm just trying to take it off as quick as possible. Alright, flip it up. Alright, so having trouble with this brake pad, but I'm going to grab my trusty pry bar, pop that thing out, show you how tiny it is. That thing had not too much life left. Pop the back one out, show you. See, that one actually had a little bit more life, which means, most likely, that the caliper pin, that's the new one, the caliper sliders or slider pins probably need to be re-greased, which I'll show you in a second. What I'm doing right now is I'm popping off the old brake hardware. Having trouble there because sometimes it's just not the easiest. I'm going to go ahead and slap the new brake hardware in its place. Basically just put it on the same way that the old ones were. Make sure you push it into place, make sure it snaps into place really nice. Alright, so grab the new brake pads. I'm going to put some silicone grease on there. Well, first, I guess I'm roughing it up on the cement a little bit. This helps the pad mate with the rotor a little faster, a little better. Alright, so putting the silicone grease on there. It's high temp silicone grease. So what I'm doing is I'm putting just enough to put a thin layer on there, and then I'm taking it all right back off basically. So I'm leaving like the thinnest layer I possibly can, because you do not want that to get onto your rotors, because it will make stopping pretty difficult. Alright, so the next thing, I'm going to take these slider pins out. So basically they're like these long bolt looking things. I'll show you the grease. See how it's all black? That's not good. Not necessarily bad, but you don't want to keep that on there. So just take a paper towel, wipe off as much as you can. It doesn't have to be perfect. And then put a very thin film of, I'm using fully synthetic grease on there. It's high temp. I think I said that before. Just kind of showing you. Now put it back in, push it all the way. I didn't do that, but you're supposed to push it all the way in, and that rubber boot will seal back on. And so with the top slider pin, I actually just pulled the caliper out of the bracket, and I'm doing the same thing. So it's still attached to the caliper. Yeah, so this is just one way to do it. So basically I'm putting a layer of grease on there and then taking the excess off. If you put too much on there, it's going to make it to where it doesn't really want to work. This is a very important step because a lot of people skip it, and eventually their brake calipers will seize because the slider pin actually will fuse with the caliper bracket, which is that piece that I'm touching with my left hand, that piece that the caliper bolts into. All right, so now I'm putting the pads in. Sometimes they're a little tricky. There were some metal tabs in the way, so I just kind of bent them out of the way. Put the brake pads in and then bent the metal tabs back in place. Make sure that you have the pads up against the rotors and not the greased edge. So when you look at the brake pads, there's going to be like a very non-shiny surface. That is usually the surface that's going to go up against your rotor. The shiny surface is actually going to be just like a piece of sheet metal that's up against the back of the brake pad, and that's where you want to put that grease. So if you look and you have the non-shiny parts, you know, facing you after you put them on, it's probably because you put them on backwards. It's very hard to mess up brake pads, but I have seen it done. So now I'm going to compress this brake piston all the way. So I'm using a large pair of channel locks with the old brake pad. Very important that you do not put the channel locks on the piston itself because it will break. You want to put the old brake pad on, and that's going to give you a nice surface to be able to cinch down on. I actually did not compress it all the way, so I'm trying to figure out what's going on. I'm like, this is weird. Then I look at it, still haven't figured it out yet. So yeah, we'll see it in a second. I'm like, what is going on? I'm like, oh, maybe I need to push that back in a little more. Oh well, it happens. I still did a pad slap on this side in under 10 minutes, so not too bad at all. All right, now that I got it on there, I'm making sure the rubber boot is not going to be in the way when I slide this caliper back down. You don't want that rubber boot to be in the way because it will rip and then you're going to have a leak. So now I'm looking for the bolt to put back into the caliper. Usually end up misplacing at least one bolt whenever I'm working on a car, and it takes me a couple minutes to figure out where it is. So see, I realized the slider pin wasn't fully seated, so fully seated it. Putting the bolt back on. All right, so anything you touch on these brakes, you want to make sure you tighten down really well. So I'm double checking this. Well, basically like snugging it, and then you're going to see I'm going to put some pressure, like pretty good pressure, to tighten it down. And then I'm checking the other one just in case. Now I'm moving everything out of the way because it is time to put the wheel back on. So you'll notice I'm not really gonna lift this thing with my back. What I did is I actually put my forearms on my knees and just did like a bicep curl basically to lift this thing up. So that way there's no pressure on my back. And then I put it up on my feet to help guide it the rest of the way. It looks kind of silly, but I've never hurt my back doing this. And that's one of the things, if you want to work on things, is to make sure you don't get hurt, because that just kind of sucks. So I'm using my feet to push the wheel up against the hub, so that way I can line those bolts back up. I will tell you that having lug nuts is a lot easier than having lug bolts, because you basically just have to like put the wheel on there and the threads are showing. Alright, so now I'm using my impact to just snug the bolts, like literally as snug as possible. And when I say that, I don't mean like I'm hammering down on it. I mean like I'm just barely seating it into place, because I'm going to use my 1/2-inch ratchet to torque these things down. Generally with passenger cars, the torque spec is about 80 to 90 foot-pounds, and you'll see what that is. Basically, I just use my arms. I don't use my body weight, just use my arms. And you want to do a star pattern. So on a 5-wheel, basically you just tighten one down, skip one, tighten that one down, skip one, tighten, and do that until you tighten all of them down. And that's it.